Regarding this two-week issue, let me ask you if you agree with Oğuzhan Hoca, of course. Let me also remind you that he made a sentence like this: "We will see what will happen in the next 2 weeks. If there is no deal, then I will intervene very strongly." Of course, all of us. The idea of economic sanctions is again an economic sanction, but we did not know exactly what he meant. It is an issue open to evaluation.
Now it is like this. The war in Ukraine has now turned into a Mexican standoff. Mexican standoff. When we say that, I mean, imagine 3 people with guns drawn on each other. 3 people, each with a gun to the right of them. A Mexican standoff. Putin cannot give up the war. I'll explain in a moment. There is an interesting situation there. He can't back down. If he does, it will be the end of Putin. Zelensky can't back down. If he does, it will be the end of him. In the United States, Trump, before he was elected, he was so much on the horse: I will finish it in 24 hours, I will do this, I will do that. If Trump cannot do this, his reputation will suffer a lot. It won't be the end of him, but his reputation is also suffering a lot of damage because of his inability to end the war between Russia and Ukraine. In fact, Trump is struggling a little bit with his own self-image. You know, let me finish this as soon as possible. Say, what should I write? He says he's finished 6 wars in his imagination. He'll say he finished this one as the 7th war. I don't know which 6 wars he has ended. Now about Russia, I was in Moscow last week. First in St. Petersburg, and then we went to Moscow. Here's the situation in Moscow. One time, in St. Petersburg and in Moscow, there are hardly any young people. It is very difficult to find young people, especially men. All world brands have left Russia, from the usual shoe brands to clothing brands to cafe brands. I have never seen a European, American, or Turkish brand anywhere in Russia. Brands have abandoned it, for example. What caught my attention both at St. Petersburg Airport and Moscow Airport was this: Turkish. Except for the airlines. I didn't see any airplanes belonging to a foreign country. I'm a pilot, so I pay a little attention to these things. So I looked at the airport and saw only Russia's own domestic brands, and as foreigners, there was only Turkish Airlines.
By the way, I am mentioning an analysis today to support you, to give you an idea. The Wall Street Journal, the American press, wrote today that Russia's biggest gain is that giant American companies started returning to Moscow before the end of the war, after that Alaskan summit.
Yeah, I was just there last week. Nothing's come back.
Not yet, of course. But some people have started to decide to return.
Now there is a red square in the shopping centers, especially in front of the Kremlin Palace. I saw different shopping centers, or military recruitment centers. They set up a table and put a screen behind it. 2 people are sitting there, civilians. On the screen at the back below, they are constantly explaining the importance of fighting for Russia. Young people are motivated. Young people have also arrived at the benches, signed up, and made it a place of recruitment. But I was like, I didn't see any youth in front of any bench I saw.
Did they escape?
Yeah, I mean right now. Either the soldiers went to war or they fled out of Moscow, wherever they went, in order not to go to war. Now we already know Russia from this. A combat soldier, those who are soldiers understand what I am saying. Those with military background know. A combat soldier is trained at commando level in 2 years. It takes 18 months to 24 months. An SS commando is trained in 4 years. A specialized combat soldier, for example, a Meki combat search and rescue team, takes 6 to 7 years on average. A combat soldier is very valuable. So you can find infantry, you can find medics, you find drivers, you find transportation. But he is a combat soldier, so he will fight and will be able to fire while looking the enemy in the eye. It is very difficult to raise a person. Now, Russia he recruited from Korea. He recruited soldiers from China. It pretended to recruit from Korea and recruited from China. It recruits mercenaries from Africa. You know they have a Wangler organization. He is recruiting soldiers from Africa through the Wangler organization. Now, but Putin has that I am standing unbowed stance. There is heavy damage in Russia. Both the Russian economy and the Russian army have been badly damaged, okay? Russia, how is it still standing? India and China. It buys oil from Russia. See a recent article by a Tintin organization based in the United States. India's $45 from Russia. That whatever the price of oil in the market, he agreed to $45. For several years, or since the beginning of the war, he says he bought oil at $45. Look, today oil is oscillating between $76 and $85. This is great for India and China, so you are buying oil at almost half the price. This reduces your energy cost, which in the industrial sector is anywhere from 15–20% to 30% of the total cost. This gives you international competition. For example, Turkey's. Imagine buying this oil at $45, so no one can stand in the way of competition in front of the growth of Turkey's economy. Now, the Russian war is a great chance for China and India. On the one hand, Russia is melting. On the other hand, Russia is losing its power. This is good for China and good for India. On the one hand, you can buy energy and oil from Russia at very reasonable prices. This benefits China and India. On the one hand, China and India are selling some materials, ammunition and munitions to Russia, or sending normal commercial material. And this works in their favor tremendously. So when you look at it like this, really Russia's war does not only benefit Russia. So it is not in Russia's interest. Apart from that, China does not want the war to end. Because if we talk about Shanghai in the Five, you will see here that they are talking about Shanghai. Russia and China were fighting head-to-head for the leadership of Shanghai. This is working in China's favor. Because as Russia melts down, the leadership of the Shanghai formation naturally falls into China's lap. The longer the war drags on, the better for China. The longer the war drags on, the better for India. Europe also benefits from the prolongation of the war, because Russia is getting weaker. In other words, the enemy that Europe fears, the enemy that is Europe's nightmare, is weakening.
It is stored in the field.
The prolongation of the war also benefits Turkey. We don't say this, we don't say it. Of course, people in official positions do not say it. It also benefits us. Look, we entered and took Karabakh because Russia was weakened. Because it had withdrawn troops from that region. We went in and got it. In Syria, we entered Syria as soon as we realized that Russia had emptied the region. We took control of Aleppo, Hama, Homs, all the way to Damascus. In other words, as Russia weakens, Turkey fills the gaps left by Russia. China is filling it, India is filling it, or the European Union is filling it. So, when you look at it like this, there are people in the world who want this war to end. There are two countries. One is Russia and one is Ukraine. So there are two countries paying the price in this war. Almost everyone in the rest of the world is gaining something from it in one way or another. Now, it is difficult for this war to end. I agree with Mr. Ozan. I mean, all indicators, all data are in favor of the war not ending.
Mr. Ozan says that Russia doesn't want it to end either.
No. I'm not sure if I missed that, but I want Russia to end. That's what I think. I think Russia can't finish it. I mean, it wants to finish it, but it can't finish it. Putin. In 2012 and 2014, during the Georgia operation or the Crimea operation, the world shouted and protested, condemned it, but did nothing. Putin actually called the test. In military literature, you know, there is a concept of a test of strength, a test of power. Actually, Putin followed the rules. I mean, he tried it in Georgia, he tried it in Otosia, then he turned around and tried it in Crimea. He realized that there was no serious noise from the world. He plucked up courage and entered Ukraine. He did not expect such a reaction. Now, until now, I looked before the TV broadcast 2 days ago. According to official records, the number of dead Russian army soldiers is 595,000. But the number of volunteer soldiers brought through Wangler reached 1 million if we count those who died at the front. I have just told you, you can hardly see young people on the streets of Russia. Now, if Putin, who started a war that killed 1 million people, if he gives up the territories he has taken, for example, Crimea, if he withdraws the Russian army, they will hang Putin in the Red Square. And if they can't hang him, they'll shoot him. There will be a coup. Look, I'm not kidding. A couple of months ago, there were a couple of articles about this in the United States. That the Russian army was disturbed at that time, if you remember, Putin dismissed the chief of staff and 5-6 generals from their posts. I am talking about the articles published at that time. Now, there are two kinds of conflicts within the Russian army. One, there is a dominant force that says we have come this far and we will not go back at any cost. There is also a group that is afraid and anxious that this has gone on too long, that if this continues, there will be nothing left in Russia. Putin is sitting on a delicate balance inside. He is sitting on a bomb with the pin pulled. Putin is here. Okay, brother, we have a deal. Okay, I'm getting out of Crimea. I'm getting out of Odessa. If he says that he cannot say that he is leaving this region after that, Putin will not be able to sit in his seat anymore. He will have big problems. So Putin cannot withdraw. Russia cannot stop the war. Ukraine cannot withdraw. I'm not talking about Zelensky so as not to prolong the issue, but Ozhan Hoca touched on it well. His seat is also being discussed there, and there is a different balance there as well. So there is a Mexican standoff here, and when we look at the history of the world, it has always been war situations that have led to Mexican standoff situations. That is to say, one side has established absolute power dominance. That is to say, the other side's ankle is on the table. As long as he doesn't hit and disrupt this Mexican trench.
Okay, thank you very much.
I want to say one more. He will integrate. When you look at the front right now, I am following the front. There is already a lock situation on the front. In other words, there is a stance on the front based on mutual artillery fire, based on mutual pulse testing, but there is a stance of protecting its position, protecting the fortified positions. From time to time, Ukraine carries out operations that are moving towards Russia, and from time to time, Russia moves inwards. But none of them finally yields results. So look, the front is locked on this line, that line, the line you see.
Now there is already a situation like this. Nobody expects that Crimea will come out. Ukraine probably knows this too. It has not been able to occupy Odessa yet. And there are those who say that maybe it did not leave on purpose, because there are those who think that Ukraine does not want to cut its ties with the Black Sea. But what Ukraine is actually saying here is that you have not taken the entire Donbass region that you want. For example, you didn't get this part of Donetsk, and I have a lot of fortress cities here that I'm holding on to. Why should I give you these places?
MK.
Here, when they said a land swap, or rather when the American president said this, it was said that Russia would withdraw from some of the places it occupied. But of course, there will be big gains. And yet, obviously, as you say, Russia did not accept that either.